Hello, everybody. This is the third in a three-part series discussing placing your immigration on record, specifically aimed at individuals that are planning on working overseas for a period of time, either permanently or temporary, to take advantage of accelerating their earnings, perhaps in lining up a better retirement. And the previous part two of this, we discussed the implications of placing your tax immigration on record or moving your tax residency away from South Africa. And that was all about exit tax, the taxes that you've got to pay to SARS for the privilege of moving your residency. My name is Mike Moore. I am a wealth manager with Wells Faber, and we deal with these issues on a day-to-day basis. And we work very closely with Irma from Regan van Roy. Irma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Irma Lategan. I am the head of private clients at Regan van Roy. So I work with private clients, meaning people moving around all the time.
Fantastic. So, Irma, the first thing I want to ask you is placing your immigration on record with SARS and moving your tax residency from South Africa to a new jurisdiction. Are they one and the same thing?
People get it confused a lot, Mike. So your tax immigration, your tax residency status is linked to what the Act says, the Income Tax Act says. So if you meet the residency tests in the Income Tax Act, you are tax resident, whether you're on record with SARS or not. The two processes therefore go hand in hand. If you cease your tax residency by breaking the two tests that we've explained in part one of this series, then you need to place it on record with SARS through the e-filing process. So that is the formalizing the facts that actually happened. So it goes hand in hand. It's actually one process, but people get it confused because what you place on record can't dictate what is actually happening in accordance with the law.
So the next question is, what happens if I, for some reason or other, do not meet the requirements to move my tax residency, and therefore there's no need for me or there's no benefit to me of placing my immigration on record, but I still want to take advantage of the job opportunity that's been offered to me overseas. What happens in that instance?
If you don't break your tax residency in terms of the Act, you will most likely not be able to prove to SARS that you are breaking your tax residency by the e-filing process. So therefore, they won't accept that you've ceased your tax residency. So the answer is that you will remain tax resident in South Africa, but then you will go work abroad and earn foreign earnings. And there are a couple of advantages still available to you in the foreign earnings exemption. So if you work abroad for 183 days per 12-month period, so that's more or less 6 months in a 12-month period, of which 60 days is consecutive, then the first 1.25 million rand of your foreign earnings would be exempt from South African taxes. So SARS won't go after you for that tax on that 1.25 million, but they can still tax you on the additional income that you earn on top of the 1.25 million. But however, the foreign jurisdiction where you go and work might have taxing rights over your earnings there. It depends on where you are, whether they do even levy taxes on earnings, on sourced earnings in their country. So you can take advantage of that. And you will not be double taxed because South Africa, the Income Tax Act, have some mechanisms in which to alleviate that.
Okay, great. So let's assume it's been a successful application and you've now moved to a jurisdiction with zero tax. Let's go for the dream. And you've now moved your tax residency and you've started earning income, but you still have some South African, maybe
Nice.
assets. How would you be taxed in South Africa? What should you look out for? How will you be taxed generally?
Generally, if you no longer, so your application was successful, you've received your non-resident letter from SARS, From the date on that's indicated on the letter, you will no longer be seen as a South African tax resident, so you will no longer be subject to worldwide tax on income and gain. Therefore, the only income and gain that can be taxed by SARS still after you've left would be South African sourced income and gain. However, the foreign country, you need to look at what the foreign country would do and how their tax system work.
So finally, or coming to a conclusion, let's assume I've left South Africa, but I had a successful career there for 25 years and I've got a lot of money in my retirement annuity, or the company pension fund, for example, which I've left behind. I'm not too sure whether I'm coming back or not, and I'd like to take it offshore. What are the rules around that?
South African pensions, retirements, so the retirement funds in South Africa will unfortunately need to remain in South Africa for a period of 3 years from the date that you were issued your non-residency letter from SARS. So they want to keep it in South Africa for 3 years, and after 3 years, you will be able to take that funds offshore through your exchange control allowances. So exchange control can maybe be another subject that we cover in later series. Yes, so they will only let it pay out after a 3-year period of you being non-resident, and the tax normally in those funds are within the fund, so you will get that money after tax.
Yes, okay. And then finally, there's another scenario. There's a number of people that left the country 20 years ago and they've had successful careers in other countries. Perhaps they had a property before they left. Often they'll be renting it out or letting a parent live there, something to that effect. But they have not formally immigrated. So I'm thinking that from what you've explained, that perhaps in terms of the Act, they can prove that their tax jurisdiction has moved, but they haven't formally placed it on record. Would you advise them to place it on record?
I would definitely
The
advise them to
immigration.
yes, I would definitely advise them to place it on record, even if it was 20 years ago, because in that 20 years they've earned income abroad, and while being a tax resident of South Africa, SARS can tax you on your worldwide income. So even if they've been under the radar for 20 years, SARS doesn't know it. So I would let SARS know that 20 years ago I left, so you can't touch that money that I've earned for 20 years. I wasn't a tax resident and I wasn't under your tax liability net.
So basically, you're just absolutely sealing the deal in a sense. You're giving yourself complete peace of mind by going and formalizing that arrangement, which may
Correct.
already be the case, but you're just formalizing. Okay, fantastic.
Correct.
So that concludes our 3-part brief series on tax immigration, or in layman's terms, you want to go and work overseas. How do you move your tax base from your tax residency from South Africa to your new jurisdiction? What I'd like to cover next, Irma, which is relevant, is we've dealt with people that have moved overseas, but they have never moved their retirement annuities, or they've got assets still in South Africa, maybe even cash in a bank account, and they're approaching retirement and they want to know what to do with it. And as soon as I say to them, well, you can convert your RA to a living annuity or you can move it overseas, but you'll have to give me a SARS tax number and I need your details, they get petrified because they think that they're going to start exposing themselves to SARS. So I want to discuss whether or not you should be fearful of SARS in those circumstances. So we'll pick that up next. But in the
Sure.
meantime, thanks so much for your insights and your advice. And I look forward to catching you on the next series.
Thanks, Mike.